Operation Mockingbird, or was it Red Sparrow the movie? Again, I'm going to be doing this video based on a single comment under one of my videos where people keep not citing their sources, either A, because the source is complete garbage, or B, they don't know about it. Let's assume that people don't know about it. So let's start from the beginning, and I'll explain my reference in a minute. 1950s, sometime during it. That's not an acceptable timetable, but that's all I can find. CIA decided to influence college students by secretly funding and attempting to deliberately put pressure on the National Student Association up until 1967, when the National Student Association decided to whiplash and go, just watch me nay-nay, and decide to just go completely anti-CIA and started helping people protest against the war. So that didn't work. Money well spent, huh? But that was an influence attack. Now that went from 1950-something to 1967. So 17 years maximum, all the way down to maybe 10. It was early 1950s. That existed. That didn't have a project name to it, but that was discovered later on. 1973, somebody working at some national security organization, could have been CIA, doesn't matter, created a retroactive compilation of work illegally done back to 1959 by some organization. Let's say it's the CIA and somebody working at the CIA making a collection of them and calling it under the crypto-nym, a name that's used to obfuscate what's going on, the family jewels. This family jewels file included mentionings of a bunch of shit the government was involved in through one of their agencies or another. It doesn't matter. But the point is, that came out later. Now that's a list of things from, let's say, 1960 to 1973. So it's at least, again, 60, 70, 13 years of shit going on, bare minimum. Within that is a mentioning of something that was given the name Project Mockingbird, not Operation, Project Mockingbird. Now, if you're not aware of how these cryptonyms are created, usually a random number generator is used to pick 2 letters or 3. PM would have been the initials. They would then say Project Mockingbird or Operation Mockingbird if it was OM. Now, after a certain point, they started naming everything Operation or Project, and then the 2 initials were whatever. Operation Terminal Freedom, TF. That's how it's done. But before a certain date, actually literally before 1970, actually maybe even later, but most of them were, the initials had to be that. And if it wasn't P or O, it would have to be something else, like Family Jewels is the name of the file set, not Operation Family Jewels. And the CIA funding of the National Student Association was called this is a great way to hide it, funding for NSA, National Security Association, what? They're called the NSA. So maybe they just left it as initials as NSA and everybody knew it wasn't referring to our NSA, or was it even existing at the time? I'd have to look that up. But the point is, when you come up with these initialisms, you wouldn't confuse a Project Mockingbird at the time with an Operation Mockingbird. Again, Family Jewels would just be called File Set Family Jewels or Family Jewels Research Project. Again, this was compiled seemingly to go after the people who did a bunch of shit they shouldn't have done from 1973 back to 1959. Anyway, the Project Mockingbird mentioned that happened in 1963, not Operation, Project, was a wiretapping of 2 journalists for around a year, off and on. Instead of just asking the local police force to keep an eye on them, accusing them of being potheads. That would have worked better. Anyway, this was because the 2 journalists used a supposed secret or anonymous source for some articles they did, and it looks suspiciously like cut and paste from classified intel on nuclear war secrets and nuclear weapons secrets that had been leaked, potentially by people who had top secret clearance. Because they suspected this to be a leak at best case, or at worst case, theft by actual people within the government or at some base, they decided to wiretap the journalists, hoping they would trip up and let them know who it was. And either A, their anonymous source never said who they were, or B, they never contacted him in that 1 year. Anyway, it was dropped. The only reference to Mockingbird that's made before Operation Mockingbird became a coined term had nothing to do with any of these cryptonyms, either random number generated or random letter generated like Family Jewels, or anything else. And again, it wouldn't have been called Operation Mockingbird. It would have been OM and then made that expression. But again, the justification for this was somebody's leaking secrets about our nuclear arsenal and the Russians and our plans. They want to track down who it is. If it was somebody finding it in a garbage can, they might get mad at him, but they can't do anything about it. If it's somebody who's in the military who did it, it's a firing squad. Now, the motivation you might be wondering about is, during the period of time from the Second World War ending till the fall of the Soviet Union, China, and other countries that were communism-based, or whatever you want to call it, really did try to infiltrate the United States. I am a personal witness to at least 2 incidents in Portland after the year 2000 of this happening by Chinese nationals that were eventually found to be honest-to-goodness spies. I mean, I've met one. I have. But I've also met, if you're not aware of it, if you're in any port city, I've met at least 3 former U.S. government employed actual fucking spies. I think I've met 12 of them by now. I worked at a job with one because it's just a job. Spies are supposed to work by leaving the United States, infiltrating another country, or monitoring data or whatever. They're not supposed to do anything in the United States. But so do the Russian spies. They come over here and infiltrate and do shit. What are you supposed to do when your opponent, when your enemy is on your own soil? They're legally forbidden from ever doing any domestic surveillance or spying activity because it's presumed they're doing it against American citizens. But what if they're not? What if they're infiltrators? This brings up a problem where their rule set forbids them from doing something that, I mean, some of you might agree with me that this might be necessary. I don't consider it necessary because spying on journalists that are overtly Americans, no. Well, what if they're traitors? You still can't do it. It's against the fucking law. Infiltrating the National Student Association? Yeah, it's a criminal act. It shouldn't have been done. Compiling the Family Jewels file talking about this shit and outing it is technically a violation of their own rules, but I consider that appropriate whistleblowing. And somebody talking about strategies between Russia and the United States and comparing them about nuke secrets and publishing it filtered a little bit by journalists, I don't consider that a big deal, personally. But it angered Kennedy. CIA, under its own initiative, meaning not legal, under the President of the United States or National Security Council or whatever 3-letter acronym group they can get away with getting permission from, did massive illegal activities domestically on domestic targets, meaning Americans. And also infiltrators that were legit opponents. Wiretapping, surveillance, and assassination plots. This also includes going after Castro or going after black people wanting to vote, because that might be a thing, because they were advocating being communists. Again, there's a political party called the Communist Party. There's also a Socialist Party. But then there's the Communist Party, quote unquote, that's really just the Russian and Chinese governments. That's a little different than a political party. There's also a religion called Islam and another religion called Christianity. But we have radicalized Christians in this country that aren't a religion. They're just an army wanting to be. And we have an actual army of terrorist attackers that call themselves Islam. They call themselves literally the religion. These are different things in practice and in reality. But we have a law against harassing religions or harassing political parties. But when they go beyond being a political party, you get the idea why this gray area seems to exist with people. These intelligence operations against American targets was known about by Congress for years and years, from Second World War ending all the way to the 1970s when it was outed overtly. 2007, declassification of most or all documents happened. Some of the stuff is held back, and each president, yes, that includes Trump not doing it, could have released all this information to the public. Okay, so that's a basic background, 10 minutes and 20 seconds worth, of what the shitty shit that our government does to its own citizens. And maybe the logic or rationale or motivation or even justification for doing it sometimes. Again, that's why it's not legal, because you'd have to rely on them not fucking up. I'm not willing to do that, and you shouldn't be either. And that went on literally to the mid-1970s, maybe the end of the 1970s, all the way back to the Second World War. That's decades of shit that we could dig through that will eventually percolate to the top after each guilty person dies, and they don't care. They always classify things till the day they die, and then suddenly it's immediately available. And again, 1973, somebody created a file called the Family Jewels, basically outing most of this. And again, Congress got a hold of it and knew about it. None of this cited anything with a cryptographic or cryptonym name, cryptographic name or cryptonym, Operation Mockingbird, because again, it would have been OM, not PM. This is an invented term from 1979 or earlier by a single individual that may be a non-existent person, a probable pen name for a book, Deborah Davis. Deborah Davis is a very common name if you look it up, in quotes, it doesn't matter, but this apparently is a person who only wrote one book, the one we're talking about, and this is the person who coined the term, the meme, the conspiracy theory, Operation Mockingbird, by taking everything that had happened, no matter what agency, squishing it together and making it all about influencing reporters, newspapers, TV, radio news, multimedia, whatever, mainstream media, for propaganda purposes, which again, the CIA is guilty of. We know about it now. But at the time, this wasn't really a big revelation at all. No, actually it wasn't. Everybody, again, this is an open secret everybody knew about. And Deborah Davis's assertion in this is that it was an active process that's even bigger than we know about, which she offered no proof of, and only named it Mockingbird because that was, at the time, a recently known name for one of the projects that only lasted a year against 2 people. So extrapolating that to something bigger is probably just this person making up a made-up name to give a name to everything. So the only person naming this Operation Mockingbird was Deborah Davis for her book, 1979. She mixed up all of the above stories to create a compelling conspiracy theory basis as a subplot, as decades of CIA manipulation of domestic mainstream media for propaganda purposes in a biography about a single person, Katharine Graham, and her association with the Washington Post. Yeah, this is almost but not quite a novel where someone just made up shit. It's based in fact, mostly. Confusing Operation Mockingbird as a 30-year mythology just to sell a book by misnaming or loosely basing it on a single one-year incident of monitoring 2 journalists, Project Mockingbird, which really happened. Deborah Davis's book claimed Katharine Graham's Washington Post were part of a CIA operation called Project Mockingbird overtly, when that is simply not true. It was mentioned in the Family Jewels file, and that's it. Now, what is this all? Why am I doing this video? The Russian government actually infiltrated almost every newspaper, TV channel, and everything else you could find. This is actually found as evidence, and they admitted it. They produced the files after the fall of the Soviet Union. The only Operation Mockingbird that could have happened is depicted in the movie Red Sparrow, partially. And again, because this was being done to us, we did it to them, tit for tat. But what do you do about it when it's happening in your own country? Well, you fail to influence the National Student Association because they're all a bunch of potheads who want free love. Because they're college students. What did you think was going to happen? Or you end up being some poor schmuck in the CIA who does a tell-all file called The Family Jewels, exposing it for 13 years.
Or you're a couple of journalists that are found basically innocent of the accusation through a 1-year wiretap. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck.